Hello, family of Christ. I want to take this time out to share a little bit about the rapture. If you're not familiar with the word rapture, it's simply a word that is being used to describe the experience of those who believe and live for Jesus, being caught up to meet with the Lord in the air at his second coming. Okay, so basically that's the meaning of the word rapture. Now, there is three positions that the saints or the believers take when it comes to rapture. There is those who believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, there is those who believe in the mid-tribulation rapture, and then there is those who believe in the post-tribulation rapture. Now, I explain that those that believe in the pre-tribulation rapture say that rapture would happen before the tribulation. Tribulation being a time of trouble and a time of trial on the people of the earth. Okay, so those who believe in the pre-trib say rapture will happen before that. That includes even the mark of the beast. Those that believe in the pre-trib obviously are more, in a sense, expecting rapture to happen any moment from now. Then there is those that believe in the mid-tribulation and they say rapture would happen during the tribulation. And then there is those that believe in the post-tribulation and they say rapture happens after the tribulation or the time of trial and trouble on the earth. What I want to share with you, I don't really want to push out whether it's pre or mid or post, but hopefully this would help us to be prepared for whatever. Okay, now there's a scripture I want to share with you here from 1 Peter 4 and verse 1 to 3. I want to read from the Living Translation Bible. And it says, since Christ suffered and underwent pain, okay, Jesus suffered, underwent pain, and it says, you must have the same attitude. We must have the same attitude like Christ. Why? Because most likely we're going to experience some of the suffering that he suffered. It says, a disciple is not greater than a master. Okay, whatever he went through, we're bound to go through some of these things. Okay, so I'll continue to read. It says, you must be ready to suffer too. We must be ready. So in other words, we must arm ourselves with that mindset that we would potentially suffer for Christ. And it says, for remember, when your body suffers, sin loses its power. And that's a very important statement there. When our body suffers, in other words, one that has made up their minds that they're willing to suffer for Christ, does not have time to indulge in their pleasures, the desires of the flesh. Now we continue to read, and it says, and you won't be spending the rest of your life chasing after evil desires, but will be anxious to do the will of God. Okay, so it's a very important scripture. There's another one here from 1 Peter 2:20. It says, of course, you get no credit for being patient if you are beaten for doing wrong. Okay, if you're beaten for doing wrong, perhaps you deserve it. But if you do the right and suffer for it and are patient beneath the blows, God is well pleased. And it says this suffering is all part of the work God has given you. Christ, who suffered for you, is your example, and it says follow his steps. So suffering in itself is not a bad thing. If you suffer for the wrong, then obviously it's deserved. But if you suffer for the sake of Christ, and by the way, the sufferings of Christ is suffering that there is no other reason for it except for your believing and living for Christ. That is a suffering of Christ. And it says, in that case, it is appointed unto us. Therefore, basically, the Bible commands us to rejoice in that sort of suffering because God uses that sort of suffering, that trial, to purify our character, according to James chapter 1. Okay, now let's read some more scripture. Romans 8:18, it says, yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will give us later. So Paul calls it the light afflictions of this present world, and it cannot be compared with what God has for his children, what he has prepared for us. So this is just temporary times of trial. It's not permanent. So we must arm ourselves with the mindset, if we have to endure it just for the season and for the time, so be it. It cannot be compared with what God has in store for us. 2 Corinthians 1:5, it says, you can be sure that the more we undergo sufferings for Christ, the more he will shower us with his comfort and encouragement. See, God has a way of keeping his children or comforting and encouraging his children in times of trials and tribulations. So let's not think the only way out is through the rapture, escaping before it happens. But we must also understand, even if we have to be here, God is able to comfort and encourage his children during times of trials. Those who prepare themselves for the tribulation will also be prepared for the rapture. Okay, that's going off the first scripture that I shared with you, 1 Peter 4:1. If you are prepared to suffer for Christ, you will not be indulging in your lustful pleasures, which means that you will also be prepared. Whether the rapture happens pre-trip, mid-trip, or post-trip makes no difference. You will be living a holy life anyway and be prepared.